Well, we had a wild weekend with wild women of faith, and the retreat was themed "How awesome is this place?" based on the story of Jacob's encounter with God in Genesis chapter 28. And I thought, well, I'm going to continue in that chapter as well. So those of you who weren't at the retreat can get a little bit more about that, what we shared. And so this morning's sermon is entitled Bethel, a Place of Divine Appointment. And although it has a different focus from the retreat, though there might be some overlap. And so in Genesis 28, I'm just going to pick out some verses from Genesis 28 to introduce what I'm going to preach today. And just looking at the clock. Okay. Anyway, let me know when it's time, because so in Genesis 28 verse 11 we read, talking about Jacob, and he came to a certain place and spent the night there, because the sun had set. He took one of the stones of that place and put it under his head and lay down in that place. 16. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it." 17. He was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." And he called the name of that place Bethel. Now, can you, in the verses I selected, can you identify anything? Is that the word place occurs 6 times in that passage. I mean, why that repetition? Why that repetition? It's because there's something about the word place in this passage that is very important. And theological scholars have coined a principle called theology of place. And that will be the basis of my sermon this morning. As we know, theology means knowledge of God. You should not be scared of that word. Every Christian has a theology, whether they know it or not. And basically, it's the understanding of God. What is your understanding of God? So everybody has a theology. So in terms of theology of place, it's the understanding of God's placement and positioning of his people. Theology of place, the connection between knowing God and the places he has chosen for his people. That's basically theology of place. Theology of place focuses on the importance of the place God wants his people to be, which is the awareness of place. And sometimes we do not have an awareness of place. Then secondly, what he requires us to do in that place. That is responsibility. And then third, the significance of being in that place. That is the consequence of the first 2. Because if God has chosen a place and there's a responsibility we have in that place, therefore, whether the consequence of being in that place depends on whether first of all you're in that place, and secondly whether you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in that place. Okay, so these divinely appointed places are meeting points between God and his people. God uses geographical and seasonal locations to fulfill his purpose for our lives. He places people in various places for different reasons, and he uses these places to draw us to himself. A lot of times we get absorbed in the place, what the place is doing to us, rather than God in the place. God in the place. In the Old Testament, place is a very important theological category where the storyline of the Bible always reveals a 3-way relationship between God, his people, and place. So theology of place begins with an understanding of God as creator. God created the heavens and earth, and really the heavens and earth are places. They're places. Earth is a place, heaven is a place. God is heaven is a place where God dwells. Earth is a place where we dwell. And so these places, heaven and earth are places and locations. Then after God created heaven and earth, then he created humanity and situated them in a place on earth known as the Garden of Eden. So the Garden of Eden was a place. So, and thus Genesis begins with humans living in God's presence in a divinely gifted place. And by the time we get to Revelation, it ends with humans living in God's presence in a renewed place, a new heaven and a new earth. So the place called Eden was ultimately a location for relationship with God. That's what Eden was primarily all about. It was, thank God for the lovely food and, the beauty of the place, the trees and the birds and everything. But it was a place where God met with Adam and Eve because, of course, we read that they fellowshiped with God. Adam and Eve walked with God in the cool of the day, experiencing his presence in that place. Their relationship with God was inextricably linked to the place he had prepared for them. The place that he had prepared for them. And likewise, for us to live with God, we have to live with him in the place where he has placed us. Where he has placed us. And so in the Bible, the land was an important part of God's relationship with Israel. The land, which we always hear about, the land which we're going to, which we've already, which we've heard about it, and part of the blessing that we're going to read about in Genesis chapter 28. We're familiar with the land, starting from Abraham, the land, the land, the land, the land. And to speak of the land is to speak of Israel's special relationship with God. It was a place that guaranteed intimacy and promoted human flourishing for the people of God, the land. And of course, we're still reading about the land today. Still reading about, the problem that's in the land today, which and that's why as believers, in spite of the whole complexity of what is going on in the land of Israel, we need to understand it from a biblical point of view. That should be the basis of our understanding of the importance of the land for the people of God. And so the Israelites in the Old Testament were to trust God and follow his commands in the land. The whole aspect of the land, of giving him, of God giving the Israelites this wealthy, prosperous land, was not just, it was for their enjoyment, but it was for his relationship with them. His relationship with them, the temple, Jerusalem, the worship. And for them not to allow the land to consume them and the gods in the lands to take them over. And so, and that's why the Old Testament, you've got to read the Old Testament. You have got to read the Old Testament. Don't just stick to the New Testament. God speaks to us in stories. We love stories, and that's what the Bible is all about. It's a story. And so when we're reading it, we're reading the story of God's relationship with his people, which also relates to us today, because that relationship continues, and that story continues with you and I this very day. And so the land, they were to trust God and follow his commandments in the land. This was the context for their obedience. The land, the place was the context for their obedience. And likewise for us, the place where God wants us is the context for our obedience. Jonah was sent to a certain place. He was supposed to be obedient and go to Nineveh. What happened? He goes in the opposite direction geographically. He was in the wrong place. And so he, of course, he was out of obedience because he was not in the place where God sent him. And so, that's not the point today. I'm not going into the story of Jonah, but you know the story of Jonah. And so for him to obey God, he had to end up in the right place. For Jonah to carry out the call of God on his life as a prophet, he had to be in the right place. And so sometimes we want to choose our places. We want to choose our places to obey God, right? I mean, if any of us wrote our story and we were to put places in our story, how many of you here would have put Aberdeen in your story? How many of you would have put Aberdeen in your story? If you got a tan like me, you would have said Aberdeen Ke. Nibo. Kilonjebe. Some of you are wondering what I just said. It was tongues. What? Aberdeen? What is that? But you're here. You found yourself in this place, which means God is here. And then you found yourself in Junction Church, which means that God is with you here. Which means that God is with you here. So rather than squirming in Aberdeen or squirming in Junction Church, just be. Just be and know that God is here because he got here before you. He got here before you. And you're here primarily because of him, not because of Kevin and Cheryl, not because of the city, but you're here because of him. Because of him. And you need to connect with him like Jacob connected with him, with God. If they obeyed God, they enjoyed the land. If they disobeyed God, they forfeited the land. Thus, the land serves as a thermometer to gauge human faithfulness to God. The place will gauge your faithfulness to God. It's not about the place. It's about God in the place. The land was both a gift and a responsibility. It was a sign of covenant faithfulness. God was faithful in giving the land, and it played an important role in the development of God's people. And they had to be faithful in the land as well. It was the focus of God's covenant with them. Well, we know how the story goes. There was a rebellion against God, and Adam and Eve, who were placed in that land, garden, disobeyed God, turned away from life, embraced death. They forfeited the garden land through their sin, were banished from God's presence. So through sin and selfishness, everyone is in exile, banished from the source of life. We know the story of the Garden of Eden. But the good news is that God doesn't abandon his people. He chooses to redeem and restore us. And so in the Old Testament, we have the story of restoration beginning with Abraham. God calls Abraham out of Mesopotamia, and initiates the covenant with him, promising to give him a land, and that land is going to be possessed by his descendants, and he was going to make him a source of blessing for the whole earth, which we today are partaking of. We are the consequence of God's covenant with Abraham. Abraham's blessings, we have entered into the blessing of Abraham. And in Genesis 12:1, the Lord said to Abraham, go from your country and from your relatives, from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And a lot of times that's what happens. We go from our country, we go from our relatives, and we go to a place that God brings us to, that God shows us. And Genesis 13:14-15, the Lord said to Abraham, Abraham after Lot had separated from him. Now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, westward, for the land which you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. And those words are repeated in Genesis 28. So the land promised to Abraham was also promised to Jacob, which brings us to Genesis 28. So in terms of Jacob, we know the story of Jacob, how he stole his brother's birthright and blessing, and in the end he had to depart from where he was, from Bathsheba, and back to where Abraham originated from, back to the region of Mesopotamia. So having blessed Jacob, Isaac sends his son away to Haran, the ancestral city of Haran. Now, he goes on this journey, and on his way to Haran, Jacob stops to rest for the night. Now, it would have taken him it would have taken him 2 to 3 days to travel this distance, and over 50 miles. And 10:11 says, Jacob departed from Beersheba, went towards Haran, and he came to a certain place, spent the night there. The sun had set, and he took one of the stones of the place, and he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And so we see here that the scene is set. So in this just one verse, verse 11, we have 3 occurrences of the word place. Came to a certain place, spent the night there, the sun had set, he took one of the stones of the place, and he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place. Once again, is repetition unnecessary in the Bible? No, it's there for a reason. The scene is being set in terms of the place. And of course, we know, jumping ahead, that place is called Bethel. So the Bible could have easily said he came to a place called Bethel, but doesn't. He came to a place. Could have said he came to Bethel, but he came to a place. So in setting that, so we see the suspense, we see the anticipation that what is all this place about? What is all this place about? So it's getting us ready for the momentous events that are going to happen. And first, let us consider how can we describe the place Jacob was in when he left Beersheba. Beersheba, where he was with his family, it was a place. His family was there, his mother, his dad, his brothers, he grew up there, everything was familiar to him. And just like Abraham had been uprooted, so Jacob is uprooted. But the circumstances under which Jacob was uprooted was totally different from Abraham's. And so he's alone, he's estranged from his family. Most likely he's dejected, probably feeling guilty. And the thing about Jacob is Jacob was indeed the heir to the blessing of Abraham, but he manipulated the situation to get the blessing rather than allowing God to just bring him into the blessing. And so he manipulated the situation, and he finds himself in this place. And like I said yesterday, you can imagine Jacob, having received the birthright and the blessing, is on his way to a place that he wasn't expecting to go. Do you think he was happy? I don't think so. He wasn't going on his way to Haran saying, I've got the blessing, I've got the birthright. No, he was a mama's boy. Jacob was a mama's boy. He was a home boy. He liked cooking. He liked his food. He was at home there. And then all of a sudden, and who knows, maybe he thought, after I've got the blessing, I'm still going to remain here with my parents, and Esau is the one who's going to go. He might have thought that Esau was the one who's going to go. And the last thing he would have imagined before he got the blessing and the birthright was that he was going to be uprooted from a place of comfort, from a place of familiarity. He had no idea. So you can imagine the place he was in spiritually and emotionally. The place he was alone, estranged from his family, dejected, guilty, and most possibly afraid. Afraid he's going to a place he's never been before. He's never left home before. He's never been without his family before. And then he's sent off with Esau breathing death threats down, just everything upended. He was vulnerable. He was running for his life. And also he was totally unsure of how the blessing was going to materialize. Because many times when we have a promise from God, isn't it amazing how we decide how that promise is going to come to pass? We have our own idea, not God's idea. His ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our ways. So he may have already been regretting the way he got the blessing and birthright, and probably fearing that he was not right in God's eyes. So, in other words, Jacob was displaced. Displaced. He was out of his place. He was displaced geographically and misplaced spiritually. There is a strong connection between our physical, geographical place and our spiritual, emotional place. There is a strong connection. And we need to be honest with ourselves. Where we are on the inside, where we are on the outside, and if they connect. Jacob needed to take his place in God. So he's on this journey, and on the second or third day, after 50 miles, he must have been tired. There were no Ubers, He wasn't riding a horse, either. Only God knows how much he was carrying, Did he just leave home with a bag, or did he leave home with nothing? But in the midst of all this negative scenario, God had arranged a rendezvous. God had arranged a place to meet with him. God arranged, he thought, well, I'm just going to rest for the night here. It's probably not the first night he had rested, because he was already in the journey 2 to 3 days. But at this particular place, he probably thought, oh, I'm just going to sleep again, wake up in the morning and continue. Unbeknownst to him, God had arranged something. And the Bible says, that our English Bible says he came onto a place, but that word came is not a simple came, not a simple come. It is a specific word, and the word is in Hebrew is paga, and it means to strike upon. It means to hit upon. It means to collide, to just walk into something, with a degree of unexpectedness. Actually, literally, it should read, he struck upon a certain place. He struck. It has the effect of to strike upon. And actually, that word is a word that is also translated as intercession in some parts of the Bible. He struck upon a place. And while sleeping in the night, Jacob has a dream. He has a dream. And we're just going to quickly look at some parts of that dream. First of all, there was a ladder. A ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And there's something about the way that is phrased. The ladder was set on the earth. That is a divine passive, because it doesn't say who set the ladder, but who do we think set the ladder? The word set is a verb. Somebody did the setting. Who did the setting? So the ladder is set. Where is it set? From the earth. Set on the earth. Set on this place. In this place. In this place that Jacob struck upon. Set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And that meant that for Jacob to really have a proper look at this object that was set before him, he had to look up. He had to look up. From looking down, being dejected in his heavy, sorrowful place, the ladder was set on earth, and it caused him to look up from heaven. And actually, that word ladder isn't a ladder. It isn't the ladder that you've got in your garage. You know, the literal word, stuck with the word ladder in our English Bible, and I think some translations might use another word, but it's a stairway. It's a staircase. It's not a ladder. It's a stairway. It's a staircase. And basically, it's a bridge. It is a connection. And so the veil between heaven and earth is temporarily suspended, and a heavenly portal opens up for Jacob and gives him a glimpse into the supernatural realm, connecting him with events that are going on in the spiritual realm. So in that place, there is a spiritual dimension. The places where God puts us always has a spiritual dimension. And we need to look away from the supernatural, the physical, and allow the Spirit of God to enable us to see to look beyond the veil, to connect with the spiritual dimension of the place where you are, where God has situated you. And the stairway at this place symbolizes heaven and earth converging for a purpose. The dream enables Jacob to experience the presence of divine beings. And what does he see? He sees angels. Angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there is no doubt that, and quite a number of scholars say that these angels were his guardian angels. And they're also angels that are sent to enable the promise of God to come to pass in his life. And so here is here is Jacob in this low place, lonely, dejected, vulnerable, poor. Basically, he's got the blessing but doesn't have any money. I mean, we know that because he goes to Laban's house and he ends up just, serving and serving and serving. So he's broke, he's alone and everything. And God opens a portal for him to know that he is not alone, that he has help, and that God has sent his messengers to support him and help him. And of course, Abraham looked above the staircase, and what does he see? The Lord stood above the ladder. The Lord was the one who set the ladder. I mean, can you imagine God with a smile on his face, seeing Jacob trudging all the way from Beersheba and thinking, I've got something planned for him. I'm going to meet him at this place. And you can imagine God setting that stairway there, and then standing up on top of it, waiting for Jacob to look up and to see him. And so the Lord stands at the top of the ladder and revealed himself to Jacob. This was a powerful manifestation of God's presence. The most mundane place. There is nothing important about that place. An unknown place. There's just nothing. A place of fear, a place of loneliness, a place of, whatever negative word you want to attach to it, a place of poverty for him. But God was in that place. It had been specially orchestrated for Jacob's benefit. And God makes himself known to Jacob, saying, I am Yahweh. Let me introduce myself to you. I am God. He probably had heard about God, of course. He would have heard about God. He's Abraham's grandson, but he hadn't met him. Because, of course, if he had met God, he wouldn't have done all those shenanigans that happened, would not have happened. So he hadn't met God. So this was a place of divine encounter. This was a place where Jacob is called to know God at a deeper level. At a deeper level, a place of appointment, the place where you are, a place where God is calling you to a deeper level, a deeper relationship with him. Every place where God puts us, that is the purpose, for us to know him in that place at a deeper level. And God personally reveals himself to Jacob in this place of divine appointment for a purpose. And he says, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. God reveals himself to him in a familiar way. Jacob, as I said, was a homeboy. He was a family man. And God doesn't say, I am God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. He says, hey, I'm God. I'm your daddy's God, and I'm your granddaddy's God. Isn't that... what's the word? Comforting. Oh, isn't that just God's mercy? Meets him. Says, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east and the north and the south. Does it sound familiar? What he said to Abraham. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So who knows the doubt that was going on in Jacob's mind at that point in the journey? This blessing, his father had blessed him at the point when he pretended to be Esau. And then as he's being sent out, as we read in the beginning of chapter 28, his father blessed him again. So he'd heard the blessing twice. Why did he need to hear it the third time? Because he needed to hear it from God himself. And like I said yesterday, many of us, prophetic words, speak a word to me. Yeah, God does use his prophet to speak a word to you, but by golly, you need to hear it from God himself. Because all that depends on the prophetic word, the fulfillment of the prophetic word depends on your relationship with him. So you cannot enter into a prophetic word secondhand, saying so and so said. And that's what we do. Somebody gave me a word. Well, no. But somebody gives you a word that initiates something. But no, by the time when you talk about it, it has to be God said to me. You have to get to the place where it is God told me, God shared, God revealed to me. Yes, somebody did say it, but in the end, I heard it from God myself. Jacob needed to hear this from God himself, and that's what happened. And so the promise was confirmed, and it brought a sense of validity. That you can imagine all the negative feelings that Jacob and the fear and the lack of faith that Jacob would have been experiencing would have disappeared. Yes, God is merciful unto me. Yes, I manipulated it, the situation. Yes, I did it my way. But God is merciful unto me, and he's still confirming that blessing. And, this is the first time Jacob receives this promise from God, and it is his spiritual awakening to God. His spiritual awakening to God. The self-revelation of God triggers a transformation of Jacob's nature. The Jacob you read up till beginning of chapter, or up to chapter 27, is not a nice Jacob. It's not a Jacob you want to be your friend. But after this incident, he was transformed. The places of divine destiny are places of transformation. When God takes you to a place, you have to be intentional that you're not leaving that place without being changed. You have to be changed. Or else you get to another place and it will be round the circle all over again. Yes, God does move us from place to place, spiritually, physically, geographically, but each place has to be a place of transformation. And so he says, the land on which you lie. Now, the land on which Jacob was physically lying couldn't have been more than, 7 feet? The size of a bed, the land on which you lie, but which was a small patch of land. And Jacob would have thought, this area is what God is talking about. But no. By the time the blessing is pronounced, all the four corners of the earth are mentioned. All the four winds of the earth, north, south, east, west, in terms of physical, geographical increase, but also in terms of time. And in you, your descendants, and all the families of the earth. So from this patch of land, and like I said yesterday, one of the rabbinic commentators said that God took the whole vast expanse of the land and folded it under Jacob as he slept. Like, this patch of land represents all the land that I've promised you and your descendants. Sometimes God brings us to a place, a nondescript place. It's a small place, and we're thinking, what is this? It's a tiny place, and we're thinking, what is this? This is not what I was expecting. But we meet God in that place, and then we see beyond. We see beyond the smallness of the place in which we are in. And by the eyes of faith, Jacob had to look beyond that patch of ground in Luz called Bethel and see a far-reaching expanse that was promised to him. You may think that what you have right now is small compared to what you see on other people's lives, compared to what you're expecting, compared to what the promises of God entail, but you must remember the dimensions God gives you in the dream or the promise rarely manifests immediately. I don't know where Cheryl and Kevin started out, but it wasn't in this building, was it? And I don't know how long they had to be packing equipment and unpacking equipment, but that was a small patch of land 30 years ago that they got to, and look at where they are now. And yet this is not the end. And so, where we are a lot of times is not the total dimension, not the total dimension of what God has for us, and we have to see through the eyes of faith. And we need to take account of what, we have done with where we are right now. The dimensions God gives you rarely manifests itself immediately. Calls to mind David. Can you imagine the prophet Samuel coming to David and rejecting all his big brothers and pours oil over David and says, "You are the next king of Israel"? David is human, what would he have thought? Would he have dreamt what it took to get there? No. You can imagine when he was in the wilderness, he would have thought, king, anointed king, I'm about to die. Saul is going to kill me. But we need to know that God is faithful. God is faithful. Now, how many minutes do I have left? 5 minutes? Oh, my time is up already. Yeah. Okay, I'll just wind up. Well, just wind up. And then God finishes and says, behold, behold, I am with you. He's already said, I am Yahweh, the God of your father, the God of your grandfather, and now I am with you. Not just your father and your grandfather, but also with you. Now behold, I am, not will be, I am in the midst of your dejection. I am with you, and I will keep you. Not only with you, but I will keep you. That's why you saw those angels going up and down the ladder, the staircase. I will keep you wherever you go, and I will bring you back into this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I promised to you. That was an unconditional, absolute support and loyalty, God's loyalty for Jacob. And twice God's presence is emphasized. I am with you, I will not leave you. It's similar what God would later promise to Moses in Exodus 23:20. Behold, I send an angel before you to guard you in the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared. And Jacob's response was, he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. And he rose early in the morning. So he woke up from the dream. He woke up from the dream. And he took the stone. So he must have woken up in the night. Had the dream, woken up in the night, and he rose early in the morning. Don't know if he slept the rest of the night. If I were the one, I wouldn't have been able to sleep. Rose up early in the morning, took the stone that he had put under his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on its top. And he called the name of that place Beth-el, house of God. Beit in Hebrew means house, El means God. Just like you have Bethlehem, house of bread. And he called the name of that place Bethel. And that place was a place of divine appointment. God was there. And it was not only a place of divine appointment for Jacob himself. Bethel is the most frequently occurring place name in the Old Testament next to Jerusalem itself. It became a place of worship and one of the most important sites in the Old Testament. It had both a religious and a political role in the northern kingdom of Israel. And so that place became not only a place of divine revelation for Jacob, but also for the nation of Israel. So, I'm going to conclude with understanding and sharpening our sense of place. Being aware of our sense of place from when we were born to now, and knowing that there are many more places ahead of us and being prepared for that place. When Jacob got to Haran, look at all the trials he went through. Fell in love with Rachel, ended up, and after he was made to serve 7 years for Rachel. And after the 7 years, he ended up with Leah. And then all the other stuff that Laban did to him. What do you think kept him going during those times? Genesis 28. God said, I am with you. I will never leave you. That's what kept him going when he was wondering, am I ever going to leave this place? Am I ever going to see the promise of God? And by the time Jacob left Haran, came back to the land. He was married, had 12 sons who became the 12 tribes of Israel. And he came with lots. I mean, he went with nothing and he came with oxen and sheep and goats and so much stuff. Because the promise of God was fulfilled. The promise that was made in that place. The encounter with God in that place. So we need to sharpen our sense of place. And in sharpening our sense of place, a deeper realization of the presence of God in our lives and our ability to see into the spiritual realm of that place. The spiritual realm of that place. And you know, in discerning our sense of place, we need to understand also the transitions that come with that sense of place, along with time, the spirituality and the sacredness that we need to set apart the place God has put us onto the glory of God. Just like Jacob saw the glory of God in that place, we also need to see the glory of God in the place where He has. Let's stand.